This RealAg Radio podcast episode is brought to you by Focus Herbicide from FMC. When tank mixed with glyphosate, Focus Herbicide provides a complete solution. Broadleaf burn-off and extended control on key grassy and broadleaf weeds like wild oats, bromes, and kochia in lentils, wheat, and more. See your local retailer or visit ag.fmc.com/ca today.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Wednesday, midweek edition of the show. Thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. Also, of course, big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. It is great to be with you here broadcasting today from Calgary, Alberta, from a hotel very close to the airport. I'm headed to Grand Prairie, Alberta. I am going to be the after-dinner speaker tonight at a Cargill Market Sense event. This is my third on the traveling road show across the Western Canadian prairies. Looking forward to being in Grand Prairie tonight, speaking to a large group of farmers from the Peace River region. Okay, today on the show, hey, we're going to be breaking down a lot of stuff. We got Neil Townsend. He's with GrainFox. He will be here today to talk about what is going on in the markets. What is the reaction to China putting on tariffs on peas and canola meal, canola oil, and of course pork as well. We're also going to hear today from Rick White. He's with the Canadian Canola Growers Association to talk about some of those canola tariffs from China as well. We'll also be joined by Todd Drummond. He's with Bear Crop Science in a product spotlight. We've got a segment with Scott Shearer. Now, Kelvin Hepner of Real Agriculture, you hear every Friday here on the show, he talked to Scott Shearer from Ohio State University, talking about what's the holdup on small, automated, broad-acre machines. Like this whole idea of autonomy and robotics, where is it? Seems to be a bit slowed. By the way, some of the sales numbers when it comes to the farm machinery sector, that ain't speeding it up by any stretch of the imagination. I'll tell you what, there's a lot of different parts of the supply chain that have been hurt when it comes to what we've seen here in somewhat of a economic downturn in farm country. The machinery sector, the OEMs, definitely the ones really taking it on the chin. And then in the bonus segment, for those of you that are listening to the RealAg Radio podcast, you're going to hear an interview that I did last week at Crops Convention with economist Todd Hirsch talking about, is it really economically smart to apply retaliatory tariffs? Or is that just a political decision? Does it make any sense economically? Now, if you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. You can also find Real Agriculture across all the different social media platforms. Well, what a up and down volatile day when it came to what was going to happen between Canada and the U.S. on tariffs. President Trump talking about going to 50%. That was all a retaliation to Doug Ford. Premier Ford saying he was going to put an export tax on electricity going to the U.S. I just have to say, yes, yesterday was like a great example of how nonsensical what is happening right now. It makes zero sense. We are wasting so much oxygen, so much time in having some sort of a trade war between two great trade partners. I just think this is wearing old for everybody. And I'm not talking about just Canada. I'm talking about, I think this is wearing old. It's becoming burdensome in the U.S. Now, the CPI numbers came out this morning. I would say that relatively they were under what analysts thought they were going to be. So we have not seen any sort of real drastic increase to inflation in the U.S. as of yet. But I'll tell you what we have seen. We've seen the market pull back. Now, that's in the equities for sure, the NASDAQ, the S&P, as well as the Dow Jones. And the other thing we have seen as well is the commodity markets. The commodity markets also showing their challenges. Oh, and this is let's look at canola here for a second, which we're going to be talking about with Neil Townsend coming up here very shortly from GrainFox. But we've got canola, November canola at 608. If you look at in old crop, let's look at the May contract for example. Yeah, we're down. We're at 584, and we were about $90 a ton higher back on the 21st of February, not too long ago. So we've really gapped lower when this China news came out last Friday. So we'll be talking to Neil about that as well. Hope your crop plans and your prep for the 2025 season is all coming together. It's shaking out well. There's a lot of things that are in the news. That's what we're here to do. Break down some of the big pieces of news on a daily basis to try to help you make better, more informed decisions. We appreciate you being here with Real Ag Radio. Okay, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to get to Neil Townsend of GrainFox right after this. Big thanks to AGI for having us down here at Commodity Classic. Joined right now by Jeff Cruzen, Dryer Business Development Rep.
With a dryer, it's almost like an insurance policy. It allows you that flexibility to start your harvest earlier and control your harvest operations. We know we're going to have to dry some of it. We hope we don't have to dry all of it. The problem with taking your grain to a commercial operation to be dried is you're at their mercy. You don't have that flexibility. If it gets full, they have to shut down for the day. When you have your own dryer, then you have total control about how your harvest is going to move forward. Maybe you have an off-farm job. You need to have that flexibility to harvest your corn, but still hold your off-farm job. Let's say you're coming to me and you say, Jeff, what do I need for a dryer? What's an average harvest day for you? And then we're going to say, what's a big harvest day for you? And then we'll size the dryer around that. So we're going to plan for today, but we're also going to talk about where you're headed to in the future. A dryer is a large capital investment, but you also need to plan where you're going to be, not where you are today.
You can reach out to Jeff by going to egggrowth.com.
What people are excited about right now is Excite Bio Yield Plus. It's a phosphate solubilizing ag biological that works on oilseeds, cereals, and legumes. I'm Eva Smuck and I work at Excite Biotechnologies. For over a decade, we have been helping farmers to achieve healthier plants and better yields with our premium liquid inoculants. You can learn more by calling 1-855-EXCITE-BIO or by searching Excite Bio online. That's XITEBIO.
And welcome back to Real Ag Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Hey, get ahead of hard-to-kill weeds with the pre-emergent soil-active herbicides Velterra, EZ, and Fierce EZ from New Farm. Apply after spring thaw for up to 8 weeks. 8 weeks of extended weed control this spring. You can find out more by going to newfarm.ca. There you're going to find a whole list of New Farm products. That's newfarm.ca. Let's chat markets with head market analyst at GrainFox. It is Neil Townsend. Neil, how are we doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
Good. Have we? During the commercial break, were any new trade wars started that I may have missed? There seems to be an abundance of them right now.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, what you're highlighting there too is the real problem is just the level of chaos, the level of uncertainty, and the potential for volatility we're seeing. I mean, it is hard to rest here. It's hard to take a moment to think about strategy, to think about how we're going to execute on what we've grown, what we're going to grow, and all that, because the playing field seems to be changing. The yard markers or goalposts are being shifted. It's really, really chaotic right now.
Yeah, whatever metaphor you want to use. And, at the time of recording here on Wednesday morning, Neil, we got a lot of red on the screen. There's not a single commodity that is green right now as we are chatting. Is the market overreacting? Like, like how do you describe what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, I think like, the ag markets have been in a bit of a doldrum for a while now. There hasn't been a lot of excitement. There hasn't been since, like the war sort of stabilized between, and, it's not a stable situation, but I mean, stabilized in terms of like, oh, we can still get wheat and product out of Ukraine. We can still get wheat from Russia. Like the market has been, trending more sideways than anything, or sideways to down. So, we came into this situation with a lack of excitement in the market, and the weather's being generally cooperative in South America. It looks like they're going to have a record soybean production and a pretty large corn production. There's still some outstanding obviously in Brazil. But so, then you throw on top of that, like uncertainty and volatility and, the trade war issue. And all of those commodities that are on the big boards that we watch, like canola, spring wheat, corn, soybeans, like what's unique about all of them is like a large proportion of them cross international lines. So, those are going to be suspect to an investor and the investor class of like, how can I make money if I don't know what volume is going to be able to get into a certain country and at what price and at what cost it's going to cost to get it there, with all of the tariff issues and the politics and everything. So, I mean, it's unfortunate. Do they represent maybe like the real value? Like, no, I think like the wheat situation, I think is tighter than what the market reflects. I think even the corn situation is trending a little bit tighter than what the market reflects. But you don't argue with the market. The price is the price. And right now, I think that uncertainty, that volatility, that is exponential. And that's what's really weighing down the market.
Well, in the corn soybean dynamic, coming out of Commodity Classic there last week in Denver, I think one of the concerns there was the market's already telling the farmer to plant more corn. Depending on how many, there's a wide speculation from, I don't know, 92, 93 all the way to, I think I've heard somebody even say 97. So, which would be huge. A lot of people are in that 95 range. Now, if you project a U.S.-China trade war, soybeans are really susceptible there. That even pushes probably more people into corn. So it's a kind of a really confusing time, middle of March, very close to actually putting seed in the ground.
Yeah, I mean, I think farmers in Canada are probably going to really rely heavily on rotation. Now, we saw some numbers from Stats Canada today. I think it's based on a survey that was done a little while ago. So I wouldn't say these numbers are like hot off the press and that we're going to, tattoo them on our chest and say like, these are the numbers. But I mean, also the American farmer, I mean, they have less choices. They're not as rotational as we are in terms of, having, 3 or 4 or 5 choices. But I do think that like the message that they're getting from their own government is plant every available acre, and also probably to plant corn. So I'm probably in the 94 million acre range, but 97 seems a little aggressive, but 95 is highly probable, I think. And a lot will depend on, combination of the market as we roll into April and May, but also the weather conditions.
What happens to canola acre? Because, I've had a lot of people asking me, what happens with canola acres? And if you think about our Farmer Rapid Fire show on Thursdays, people are all over the map. And so I've just kind of been saying, I don't know, same as last year, because it's really hard to shake out. How much does this China news last Friday, the tariff on canola meal and oil, we're still waiting for the decision on seed. How much does that impact the planting acres?
Again, I would think that so the numbers that came out today from Stats Canada have it at 21.65 million acres. And that was the highest estimate was 21.75 and the average was just around 21. So it came in above expectations. I mean, there's not a lot of people involved in the survey, but it came in above expectations. That's still down from last year by about 350,000. But I would think that probably as we progress, if the situation stays the same, that, that last 320 acres might go to something else. We might see a little boost in flax, or some people might try to, slide in a pulse acreage or something like that. But so, I think this is the high watermark of canola is what I'm trying to say. I think when all said and done, we might wash out closer to what the average guess was 21 million acres. And, I don't know. I don't think anybody really knows like what the trade regime is going to be going forward. I mean, like we've got the double barrel of we've got hostility from the Americans and we've got hostility from the Chinese. And combined, those are two very critical markets for raw canola. And also, China hasn't done anything on the raw canola yet in terms of upping the tariffs. But, they've done it on the meal and the oil. But I'm saying they're also key markets for the products, especially the meal for China. So, it's going to be very interesting. And then, our domestic crush industry, like it relies on the export of the products too. So, I mean, how hard are they going to go? And I think there was some news that CHS was pulling out of Winkler, Manitoba. Now, is that just a business related to CHS, or is that like they've sort of said, like, we think these tariffs, we think these things are going to be in place a lot longer than maybe the general market does, and we don't want to be involved in it in that way?
Yeah, I've been trying to get my head wrapped around a lot of times we jump, how does this impact the farmer? But I've been trying to get my head wrapped around what does this news last Friday mean for the domestic crusher? Rough times. We've moved from where we're going to have 17 million metric tons of domestic crush capacity. We've peeled some of that back because of some of the political risk and the policy changes as it relates to renewable diesel and the slowness of, things like SAF coming to be more mainstream. The Trump administration is a factor there. We don't have any details on Canada's participation in 45Z, canola's participation on the carbon intensity score, all of that stuff. Then you add into it, we may have challenges on exporting meal and oil to China. A lot of uncertainty for crushers here as well, not just the farmer.
100%. And I mean, again, like, you could explode your head trying to follow the daily recriminations and the daily manipulations of what's going to happen with sustainable aviation fuel or, biofuel in general, ethanol policy. I mean, all of those dominoes, they could fall. I mean, maybe nothing will happen, and it will be a balance in the United States between making sure the farmer community is pleased enough with the Republicans to go out and vote for them in the midterms or whatever it is. They're a pretty loyal bunch though, so I doubt that they're going to en masse retreat from the Republicans. But I don't have the certainty that we'll have this conversation, say this time in 12 months or 24 months, and that the U.S. biofuel and ethanol policy will still be what it is today, and it could be drastically different. I don't know. Yeah. And I think that has a big impact on, the crush industry in Canada.
Pulses also taking one on the chin, so to speak, to use a boxing reference, based on China's news last Friday. What does the pulse grower think at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still like one thing I would say about the pulse balance sheets for Canada, peas, lentils, in particular, like the green lentils and the green peas, even the yellow peas and the red lentils, like none of those are aggressively loose. Like, in and of themselves, they are fairly supportive of prices. So what really matters is trade policy. So, the trade policy out of China, very negative. What's the trade policy out of India? Right now, they renewed the tariff-free access for yellow peas, so that's positive till May 31st. Then you got to look at what the growing conditions are in India, and there's a wide range of sort of opinions about that. We've been hearing a lot about like the threat of very, very hot weather here in March and April, which could, diminish the crop. It's not the heavy pulse growing season right now, but again, something is being grown that impacts the pulse market 365 days a year in India. So, we'll watch that kind of thing. And then there's some other markets that have been, relatively good, like Bangladesh. But no, I mean, if China is going to impose a 100% tariff on yellow peas and not take yellow peas from Canada, I mean, it's been a bit of an up and down market, but it's been fairly solid this year. I mean, that will have a detrimental impact on yellow pea prices and yellow pea marketing. So, not good. And again, it's just, like if you're the government of Canada and, we only have so many people who can negotiate things. I mean, they have a lot of work to do to try to get these markets stabilized and open for Canadian product. And I don't know if there's enough people to solve all these problems right now. And plus, it's being done at maybe a higher level than the an individual commodity level, because this issue is related to like EVs and electric cars and steel and aluminum and all this
rare
kind of
earth
stuff.
metals.
Rare earth metals, right. And we're collateral damage, and that's very difficult. Now, one thing is that you got to also consider the people in the countries that are, have been buying this product. So, if we shipped 800,000 tons in the last 12 months for yellow peas to China, it's because they want 800,000 tons of yellow peas. Now, it could be relative to some other things or whatever, but, now we're suddenly saying that you don't have access to that because it's going to be prohibitively expensive. Then the question is, does Russia have enough to supplement them? Or do they switch to other things? Does that mean that, because green peas weren't covered, do they buy some more green peas from us or some other product from us to make it up? So I don't know. And India, we're always dealing with the complications of trading with India, right? So that's why I think like April 2nd is actually going to be a fairly interesting day when the U.S. comes out with their reciprocal tariffs, because a lot of the countries that will be targeted in that round, if it's actually what they say it will be countries like India, Japan, Korea, places that have, very high tariffs on the import of things and want, fuller market access to markets in, the U.S. So, that could be, it's not without some logic what the U.S. is doing. It's just, I'm surprised that their first, victim was Canada. That seemed a little surprising to me.
Yeah, Canada has a pretty low, comparatively speaking to a country like India, a very low effective tariff rate across all products. Hey, Neil, this has been fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us here today on RealAg Radio, and keep up the great work at GrainFox.
Yeah, thank you very much, and have a great day.
That is Neil Townsend from GrainFox. Hey, for every acre, every row, every seed, precision wins every time. Only Seedmaster delivers unmatched accuracy for better yields and bigger profits. Seedmaster, driven by precision, leading the way in seeding innovation. When we come back on RealAg Radio, we got a product spotlight with Bayer Crop Science, and then we're going to hear from Rick White, President and CEO of the Canadian Canola Growers Association, as well as Scott Shearer from Ohio State University to talk about where the heck are all these autonomous small little units running around the field like we've been seeing in some of the videos and the promo pictures and all those kinds of things. They haven't happened yet. Where are they? We'll be right back on RealAg Radio right after this.
At Alliance Seed, every seed starts the story of your success. With Alliance Seed varieties, you're not just planting seeds, you're planting the promise of a prosperous future. Our top-performing wheat, barley, oat, pea, and lentil varieties are tailored to meet the unique challenges of your farm, ensuring high yields, strong standability, and reliable disease resistance. Discover the Alliance difference at allianceseed.com or call 1-877-270-2890.
We are here at the Helena booth. Joining us is Alex Park,
the division agronomist for Wyoming, Colorado, West Nebraska, and West Kansas.
Heading into this 25 season, what are some of the agronomic things that growers are thinking about?
Efficiency, period. There's a lot of unknowns, so if we can take the edge off our risk by increasing the efficiency of, particularly on our fertility programs, and making sure that our fertility programs deliver us ecosystem services where things like phosphorus and potassium can deliver drought resilience, de-risks my operation, can be really huge for us. If I could beg anybody to do one thing, let's take a soil test. Find out what is in your bank. You spent a lot of money on this land. What's in the ground? How can we efficiently extract the nutrients at a reasonable pace at the right time? Can't do that without a soil test. Find out what your investment is, and that's going to let you make the right decisions on your fertility program. And if you don't have that, you're starting from a place where how much nutrients is that crop going to extract, and that's not as efficient as you could be.
Make sure you go to resurge.innovate-ag.ca or helenaagra.com.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. I am Lindsay Smith, and joining me now for today's product spotlight with Bayer Crop Science is Todd Drummond. He's Customer Solutions Lead for Southwest Manitoba. How are you doing, Todd?
Hey, doing well. Thanks, Lindsay.
Well, we are in that crunch time between planning and action. That big question for farmers, weed control, specifically with resistant weeds in the mix. How do you tackle that question?
Obviously, with resistant weeds, I find you kind of got to narrow it down a little bit. And depending on when you're dealing with them. So, for example, if you're dealing with resistant weeds in a pre-seed burn-off application, I always plan to add more than one mode of action in the tank when you're doing that burn off with glyphosate. I do consider the groups that you're adding to the Roundup when targeting those specific weeds. For example, many of the pre-seed burn off products that we're currently using are group 2s, group 4s, or group 14s. And, this is quite timely, obviously, but we've got a new product called Husky Pre, which is a great fit in front of wheat and barley, where it uses actually group 27 and a group 6. So if you're concerned about group 2, group 4, and group 14 resistance, those Husky Pre will take care of those resistant weeds as well. Now, on the flip side of that, in crop, for example, if you're dealing with resistant weeds like wild oats, green foxtail, yellow foxtail, that's creeping up all the time. I try to ask a lot of questions to my customers about, past history of groups that they've used, and if they've seen any specific issues. So, for example, the comments would get into how much group 1 have you used, or how much group 2 have you used, or what have you used last, or what kind of a rotation have you done, and are those products working effectively for you? But now keep in mind, I think there's still a need for using group 3s and group 8s as well, and any of those products on top of that. I do also like to ask the grower what they plan to grow the following year. So for example, if it's field peas the following year, so if they're into wheat this year and they're planning to grow field peas next year, I would then maybe have them consider a group 1 in crop for that wheat that year, so that you're not using a 2 and then stacking a group 2 on top of it again. Always, keeping in mind that we want to have a really good rotation. And then, with broadleaf weeds, they're often forgot about, but here again, we want to make sure that growers are using potentially multi-modes of action when targeting specific broadleaf weeds. And that's really nice in our system as well, when you get a product like our Infinity brands, which are 27s and 6s and 4s as far as the groups and mode of actions that we're using there as well. So that's kind of where I like to start anyway.
So Todd, what should farmers keep in mind when planning their rotations that might help with managing resistant weeds?
Yeah, so if you're struggling with some resistant weeds, maybe a person could consider some Roundup Ready Extend 2 soybeans or TrueFlex Liberty Link canola. For example, if you're dealing with some flushing wild oats, you have that flexibility to go with more than one application of glyphosate in that canola or soybean. If you're concerned about glyphosate-resistant kochia, that TrueFlex Liberty Link system allows you to put on a Group 10 or Liberty to control that Roundup kochia. As well, the Roundup Ready Extend 2 system will allow you to use XtendiMax for residual and topical protection as well.
From the perspective of, you mentioned rotation, of course, being important, and you also mentioned those broadleaf weeds. Volunteer canola, we know, can be one of those weeds that farmers have to deal with. How do you broach that from the Bayer Crop Science perspective?
Yeah, as with volunteer canola, typically we always have to assume that some of that population is a Group 9 resistant volunteer canola. When I think about it, let's say in cereals, for example, whether that volunteer canola is a TrueFlex volunteer or a TrueFlex Liberty Link volunteer, a lot of the products that you're using will have groupings like a Group 2 again, a Group 4, a 6, a 27. So there's really no concern about that point in time, especially in cereals. All of the groups we actively use are quite active on volunteer canola. Maybe corn, for example. We've got Lotus and Partner, which is a Group 27 and a 6 as well. Works extremely well on volunteer canola and a lot of the major other resistant broadleaf weeds as well that we're dealing with. In Southwest Manitoba, we're rotating soybeans nicely. When we think about volunteer canola in soybeans, we want to make sure that we're protecting that soybean and keeping it clean during the critical weed-free period. So it's important to manage the canola volunteers. We're in the cotyledon stage. And if you're using an XtendiMax 2 product specifically, if not, you should maybe consider planning for a pre-seed of a Group 2 or a Group 14 in that crop rotation as well, managing that volunteer. So, volunteer canola is important, but I think we have lots of solutions out there as well to manage that that weed.
So, Todd, you've given us plenty of options for dealing with some of our toughest questions, but it does sound to me like there does need to be that bit of planning, looking back to look forward. So for those who are making these decisions right now or have any questions, where can they go for more information about what Bayer Crop Science has to deliver on this season?
Yeah, for sure. So, if you like more information, you can visit cropscience.bayer.ca, or you can reach out to your local Bayer Crop Science representative as well.
Thank you so much, Todd.
Thank you.
We'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
There's power, and then there's superpower. Advancing the unstoppable superpower of pre-seed from New Farm. Take control. Eliminate weed competition and start clean in spring. Manage weeds early in canola, cereals, and pulses. Conquer, Goldwing, Thunderhawk, and Blackhawk EVO. Convenient formulations and multiple modes of action. Add more power to glyphosate, more benefits to your burn down. Go to newfarm.ca/burndown.
It's summertime, and you've got a lot of important decisions to make when it comes to your corn crop. Let the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com help guide you through those big decisions with input from leading experts in the field. If it's spray timing, disease identification, or any other field issue, the Corn School's got you covered. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Pride Seeds.
Now that we've heard some of the market reaction to what we're hearing out of China, let's talk about the policy side of the equation. But first I want to tell you about Väderstad. Väderstad is partnering with Canadian farmers for outstanding emergence. Their line of tillage, seeding, and planting equipment offers solutions for all soil types, field conditions, and tillage practices. All this is helping you maximize yield. To learn more and find your local dealer, visit Väderstad.com. Lindsay Smith had a chance to catch up with the president and CEO of the Canadian Canola Growers Association, Mr. Rick White. Here's their conversation.
We've had better weeks, let's put it that way, and maybe better months. But late last week, we did get news that China had placed 100% tariff on canola meal and canola oil coming out of Canada into China. And the canola growers, of course, are part of a group of producer groups asking for compensation on this. Let's back up, though, and start with just how impactful a tariff of this magnitude will be or is now on the canola industry.
Right. Well, I mean, for now it's confined to canola oil and canola meal. The good part of that is that it is a smaller piece of our export program. The much larger piece is canola seed going into China. So the 100% tariffs on oil and meal are clearly retaliatory on behalf of China in response to Canada's position of 100% EV tariffs, I should say, and Canada's imposition of 25% on steel and aluminum. So this is a very clear and direct response from China regarding the Canadian initiation of that. The Canadian government was working lockstep with the U.S. and so followed along with them as a partner in this to stand with the U.S. Of course, that's not working out very well for us now because now we have retribution from China and the U.S. is causing problems or about to be causing problems with trade. So in terms of the impact, right now it's bad, or it could be, but the real issue will be when they do the anti-dumping investigation and finalize that to determine if there is seed tariffs on seed, which we believe are completely unjustified because we put in the data and responded to the Chinese MOFCOM investigation into anti-dumping, and we gave all the farmer data that we could find showing that they were selling not below market, and there is no evidence, but that I don't think we can rest on that. And so the real question is what will what would the 25% tariff mean on, $5 billion worth of seed. And again, I'm not even sure it's going to be 25%, Lindsay, because in the Australian case, when they went after barley, China, the same way, they ended up with a barley tariff of, I think it was 83 or 85%. So we don't know what to expect on the seed side. That is yet to come. But that would be devastating to the canola industry and the market economics. I cannot imagine that it would work with that kind of a tariff level in. But we'll have to wait and see, unfortunately, and we'll find out more. China's in a position to respond through their investigation with a preliminary tariff right now, but they haven't done that yet. So right now we're kind of holding our breath.
So could this then be an opportunity? I mean, this tariff is supposed to go into place March 20th. As you mentioned, it's not currently levied against seed, only oil and meal. Is this an opportunity to negotiate?
Well, that's my view on it. And in fact, I've actually said that on a number of calls that there have been with the government, between the government and the industry. Now is the time for Canada, now that it is clearly retaliatory with oil and meal and yet to come on seed. Now is the time for Canada to open it up with China and put on the table the 100% EV tariffs and everything else that triggered this, because this is triggered by Canada. They need to put that in a negotiating window now and say, let's talk about this. And for heaven's sake, they need to negotiate this away. So we don't have to fight a trade war with two superpowers at the same time, which is what this is lining up to be. And we can't win that fight. We can't win one of them, leave alone two of them at the same time. So let's get rid of, I think the China one is debatable and negotiable. And Canada needs to stand up and undo what was done to try to get China to back down.
And as you mentioned, we are linking this, of course, to Canada levying that 100% tariff on EVs out of China. And you're right. I mean, this was done in solidarity with our U.S. counterparts. And I think understatement that's not working out so great, Rick. I'll be honest. Yeah. So, I mean, but that does, I suppose, put Canada in a position, if I'm understanding it correctly, that, we could be negotiating and perhaps that 100% tariff is part of that negotiation and could be removed. So now, before we talk a bit about the compensation side, as you mentioned, this is meal and oil, so could still see movement tariff-free of seed. Is this a bigger concern for our domestic crush capacity or our domestic crushers versus farmers, or how does that all shake out?
Well, given it's predominantly seed, it's less about the crushers. I can't say that for the U.S. market, though, because that's mostly oil and meal, which is crusher value added going into the U.S., but that's a different story. But on this one here, it would be unfortunate to have oil and meal have that 100% tariff on. But again, I think it's all about the seed and how China is going to treat that. Because that is the bread and butter and that is the bulk of the movement. And on a principle basis, those tariffs are not justified even in what they did. So, the real issue with the Canadian crushers really is the American market, is a really big threat.
Mm-hmm. And we probably have to schedule a whole other call to talk about the biofuel, renewable fuel, all that side also. So we're going to stay focused on this Chinese issue for now. Last question then, I guess. So we are hearing certainly a lot from producer groups on this tariff from China because, of course, it impacts, yes, canola, but also seafood, pork. There's several different commodities impacted by this. What do you think or what is sort of what you're discussing with government, et cetera? What do you think is what compensation could look like or should look like if the government chooses to go that way and doesn't negotiate this way?
Right. So it's hard to determine what amount at this point in time. We're still waiting for the determination on the seed, which is a very big chunk. And we had sent a letter to the federal government when China initially launched their anti-dumping investigation, and we quickly put the government of Canada on notice as a canola industry, us included, that compensation should tariffs be implemented by China, that the Canadian government needs to be ready to find a way to compensate farmers for commensurate with the losses that will be incurred, yet to be determined, and it's still yet to be determined yet. We estimated in a study that we had done that the farm gate impact could be anywhere from a $2 bushel to $5 bushel amount. It could be within the range of about $1.7 billion to $3.5 billion lost at the farm gate level. So those are the parameters that we put out there, kind of what the impact could be on farmers. And that was a third-party research that we had done. At the end of the day, it'll depend where the tariff level is set, if indeed it is set. That will determine how much money farmers will need to be compensated, because it is something that is out of their control. And again, time, how long is this going to last? Is it going to last a short term or is it long term? Right now, the government is offering loan products in various forms. You've seen that. And that would impact or help, in their view, guard against both China and the U.S. problem that we have. But and I've said this publicly, farmers should not be expected to borrow their way through these problems that are looming. China, nor with the U.S. They're going to need a cash injection. They're going to need support with cash, not increasing their debt. And it doesn't matter if it's interest-free or low interest or more availability, it's all debt that needs to be paid back at the end of the day. And so we're asking for the government to be ready to compensate farmers commensurate with the losses that the farmers will likely incur. What's the mechanism? I don't know, but it will be a challenge. But at the same time, something needs to be done. We have to look after farmers, because when they do well, the rural communities do well, the rest of the industry will do okay as well. But you got to look after the farmers and make sure that they're financially and economically able to make it through some significant problems that are brewing on the trade front. How might we are still currently prorogued in Parliament. We have a new leader. We have a Prime Minister designate that may be Prime Minister within days, but we may also then be in an election. How does the state of where the Canadian government is at sort of leave all this? It's very problematic. Because, have a new prime minister likely for a fairly short period of time, and then they go into likely calling an election pretty quickly, I'm assuming. But as soon as the election is called, it's in caretaker mode, and there's not going to be any new money for anybody until the election is done. So, unfortunately, we got a period of time of waiting before anything can be done. But hopefully, whoever the government is after the election, we will be there in their face fighting for farmers too, because by then it'll be several months down the road. And this will all be clear. What happens in China, possibly we'll know more by then. Hopefully not before then. But at the same time, then we know what we're asking for. Then we know what to expect, and then we know what the problem is, and then we can deal with it with the federal government. But they're going to have to come up with a way to compensate farmers somehow. This action from China in particular was triggered by Canada's action to begin with. So we feel strongly that the federal government needs to help farmers out in this time, given that it's retaliatory reaction to another government policy.
All right, Rick, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Lindsay.
That was Rick White, President and CEO of the Canadian Canola Growers Association. So asking for farmer compensation, very similar to essentially the $9.7 billion package that the U.S. farmers are going to get for the market going down and trying to backfill some of those losses from that 24 crop. Basically saying, listen, loans are not good enough. More debt does not help. We talked about here today about the gapping down that has happened in the market, and there's still more to come. If China decides to put a tariff on canola seed, oh boy, in combination with what's potentially happening on canola exports to the U.S. on the biofuel side of the equation, rough times indeed. FP Genetics brings new seed genetics to Canadian farmers, empowering growers to thrive in ever-changing conditions. Visit fpgenetics.ca to discover FP's dynamic portfolio of seed and to contact your local territory manager. Gain a genetic advantage and experience the next wave with FP Genetics. Right back on RealAg Radio right after this.
If you're applying a low-rate N stabilizer, you might be falling for a losing strategy. Low-rate products promise great results, but may lack the potency of higher active ingredient concentrations, so great isn't always what you get. Don't put yield at risk. Put your trust in proven solutions. Anval Nitrogen Stabilizer, Super U Premium Fertilizer, and Tribune Nitrogen Stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. These products offer higher active ingredient concentrations imitator brands can't match. See the difference at defendyourn.ca.
Find everything you need for outstanding weed control in your wheat and barley from the cross-spectrum herbicide experts at Corteva. Corteva is proud to offer a wide selection of cross-spectrum herbicides for maximum convenience, effective resistance management, and customized control of your toughest grassy and broadleaf weeds. No matter what kind of weed challenges you're experiencing, we've got the right fit for your farm. Visit Corteva.ca to learn more.
Delivering reliable agricultural lab testing for your crop, soil, feed, water, and seed. SGS is uniquely positioned, ready to elevate your business in Canada and the United States. All you got to do is call 1-800-952-5407. That's 1-800-952-5407. That is SGS. Okay, now let's talk about machinery. And rough times from machinery sales aspect. But right now we're going to talk about the future. We're going to talk about autonomy and robotics. And honestly, I have been to the last two Agritechnicas I have been to, for example. And hey, think about the Farm Progress show when Case unveiled that big autonomous unit. Remember that big full-size tractor that had no driver? That feels like, well, it was years ago. Where are these technologies? Where is all this? It's not reality yet. Slow coming. The future is not now. The future is maybe in the future. Well, at Crop Connect, going back several weeks ago, Kelvin Hepner had a chance to catch up with Ohio State University's Scott Shearer to talk about this very issue.
Scott Shearer of the Ohio State University joining us here on Real Agriculture. And Scott, it's been quite a few years now we've been talking about the horizon for ag machinery shifting to smaller autonomous machines. Where are we at in terms of that horizon getting closer? Is it still in the distance somewhere?
We have a number of companies that are developing autonomous tractors and autonomy kits for tractors. I was at Agritechnica in 2023. I took 35 pictures of different product offerings and or concept vehicles. Now, one of the things that still kind of limits the sales of these is managing some of the liability associated with autonomous tractors. Having said that, the other thing that I think is going to slow this down a bit is this current downturn in the ag economy. When farmers have money, they tend to purchase technology. When they don't, they focus on keeping the iron they have running, okay? And so we see a lot of companies. One of the companies we've had some interaction with, Sabanto, has an autonomy package that gets dropped on a utility tractor. I think last count they had about 105 of those systems out, and their niche has been sod farms in Georgia, Florida, and Texas. The question is, when do we see the same thing in row crop agriculture? And we also know that Deere has been, they have a tractor out that has, all this is supervised autonomy, by the way. It's not fully autonomous yet. In other words, there's going to be somebody still monitoring it. But Deere had a number of units out on test this past fall for tillage applications. And so we're not certain when that product's going to be in the marketplace, but I suspect when we see that cyclic nature of the ag economy come back again, we'll start seeing a lot more of this equipment in the field. Let's not forget the typical ag tractor has a life somewhere around 15,000, 20,000 hours. In the state of Ohio, we know those farmers are using that tractor about 300 hours a year. If you do the math, somebody buying a new tractor, that tractor is going to be on a farm a long time, and we have to think about this generational shift too. We're at a point now when you buy a tractor, it comes with auto steer, and it's built into the tractor. The farmer can choose to use it or not, but remember, if we go back in time, that was a technology that was not standard on tractors. And so we'll see this continue to roll out in some form or fashion. We're going to continue to remove a lot of the control elements that the equipment operator was responsible for. We're going to relegate that to automated controls, and that's all along that step of going to full autonomy. But again, we'll be at supervised autonomy where we have somebody sitting in an office watching multiple tractors.
That was Kelvin Hepner talking to Scott Shearer of Ohio State University. It'd be interesting what the timeline kind of looks like here going forward. You know, and he alluded to the fact that one of the things that has slowed all of this down, even supervised autonomy, is the fact that we've seen weakness in the machinery market. So if you look at the Association of Equipment Manufacturers U.S. data for tractors and combines, self-propelled combines are down 65% year to date. So the end of February of 2025 compared to end of February 2024, combines are down 65%. Total farm tractors are down 16.8%. Four-wheel drive tractors are down 47.8%. And two-wheel drive tractors are down 16.3%. So across the board, pretty staggering result. And in the two big categories of four-wheel drives and self-propelled combines, you know, basically we're down 50% or more, and that's not leading. That's going to be cutting of some of the budgets, right? That's streamlining. Then you wonder why we see some of these factories closing. It's the reality. They're slowing down production. They are slowing down production, and what also happens is. And I don't know this. I have not gone through some of the annual reports, but you got to think what gets under attack is some of the research and the innovation budgets. Hey, you know what? We got to live to fight another day. We've got to do some cost cutting here in order to save some of our earnings. So yeah, we may have to push out that autonomous unit that we were going to put out in 2030. It's now going to be 2032. That's the kind of discussions that are happening in some of the boardrooms. If you look at in Canada, self-propelled combines are down 56.7% year to date. Four-wheel drive tractors are actually up. They're actually up year to date, 114%. Very strong sales of four-wheel drive tractors in February. There's more to be dug in on that one. And then two-wheel drive tractors are basically flat to last year, up 2.9%. So the numbers in Canada are a little, on a percentage basis, are a little bit better. Besides combines, they are somewhat better. In the U.S., it's bad. Bad, not good at all. It will be fascinating to see how quickly some of this happens in terms of autonomy. But like I said at the beginning, you just think back to how much we have seen autonomous, robotic prototype units going back 2 years ago to the last Agritechnica. Man, that's all you saw was autonomous units. Definitely more of a fit early days in the non-broadacre areas of agriculture. And we're still waiting to see the broadacre applications. If you have any feedback on today's show, I'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media platforms. You're also more than welcome to call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. And if you're listening to the RealAg Radio podcast, you're gonna hear economist Todd Hirsch talking about, does it make any economic sense? Any economic sense at all to have retaliatory tariffs, or is it more of a political decision? Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio, and we will chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for downloading this RealAg Radio podcast, brought to you by Focus Herbicide from FMC. Lentil and wheat growers get a clean start this spring with Focus herbicide. Along with early burn-off and extended weed control, Focus herbicide provides excellent resistance management. See your local retailer or visit ag.fmc.com/ca today.
Welcome to the bonus segment here of RealAg Radio here on this Wednesday. We've talked a lot about tariffs, and I know if you think you have tariff exhaustion, let me tell you, I am exhausted. It's hard to keep up with it all. But one of the main questions that I have is, how should Canada respond to this? And we see that the U.S. is going to be putting on those tariffs, 25% tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, and not just Canada, but really any import of steel and aluminum into the country. And the question is, with this situation and others, how should a country like Canada respond? And there's the economic response, and there's the political response. And let's be honest, the political response kind of trumps everything, so to speak, like that pun. So at Crops Convention, I had a chat with economist based out of Calgary, Alberta, Todd Hirsch. And this is exactly what we chatted about. We chatted about the economics of tariffs and what is more important, the political response or the economic response of tariff retaliation. Here's Todd Hirsch.
Todd, it's great to chat with you.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, hey, it's been a while. We were trying to talk, maybe probably 10 years ago we met each other when you were speaking at Farm Tech here in Edmonton.
That's right, yeah.
A lot has changed in that time period. We don't need to do a full history lesson, but you just got off the stage giving a keynote address to the delegates. I guess from an economic standpoint, where does Canada sit here at this moment in time with dealing with the new tariffs and the threat of potentially, quite frankly, even more?
Right. Canada's not in a good spot. There's not really any way to sugarcoat this. If these 25% tariffs and the 10% on energy, if these are here to stay, this is going to be a very, very difficult year economically for Canada. But, the threat of tariffs can sometimes be worse than the actual tariff itself because it creates this environment of uncertainty. And if there's any situation that businesses, don't like to operate in, it's not knowing what the rules are going to be. So while the tariffs themselves, if these 25% tariffs stay in place, very difficult year for Canada, for agriculture. We are trade dependent. I think it will stimulate a lot of creative thinking about what do we do about this? How can we diversify our trading partners? All of that, though, takes time. It's a worthwhile endeavor, but it takes time. But there's no way around this. The 25% tariff is going to be tough.
So economically, what's our leverage point? Is it Canada really needs inflation in the U.S. to get higher so the consumer feels some pain eventually?
Well, that would help, and we hate to think about our best case scenario is hardship for our American neighbors because I think most Canadians, we know Americans. They're our friends, they're our relatives, they're our neighbors, and we don't want hardship on them. But we do need in some way to get the president's attention. If that's through higher inflation on American consumers or maybe stock market volatility, something that would get the president's attention to say, hey, maybe these tariffs, are not such a good idea after all.
Yeah. So Canada's retaliated. We're recording this Wednesday morning of this week, and the Prime Minister said this morning that unless the U.S. backs completely off of their tariff amounts, Canada's leaving the retaliatory measures in place. From an economic standpoint, are the retaliatory tariffs on Canada's part a good idea?
Not economically, to be honest. I always joke there's an economic answer and there's a political answer, and politics is always going to win. Economically, these retaliatory tariffs are going to hurt Canadian consumers far more than they're going to necessarily inflict damage on Americans. We do want to get their attention in that way, but it is creating a hardship on Canadian consumers. So economically, the very best way to deal with this would be almost to just do nothing and ignore it. Politically, that is an impossible answer. It is not possible at this point for our Prime Minister or any Premier to say, we're just going to pretend this isn't happening. Canadians want some action. They want some justice. They want to feel like we are, standing up for ourselves. So that's, I think, the rationale politically with the retaliatory tariffs.
So economically, leaving the politics aside, economically, what would be a good response?
Economically, the very best response would be do nothing, work hard to reduce interprovincial trade, which I think is maybe one of the silver linings that is coming out of this crisis, is that in Canada, our system of interprovincial trade has been embarrassingly inadequate. So if we can address that, I think also work hard to diversify our trading partners. There's a lot of other markets around the world. Sure, they're tougher to get to. There's transportation costs, there's time zones and culture and everything else. But I think that's what we need. Economically, that would be our best course of action.
Is there examples of countries you're thinking about there?
Well, when I think about the United States, relatively the same size as the European Union in terms of population and economy. And also Japan. We tend to forget about Japan, a massive G7 country that seems to be completely forgotten right now in geopolitics, but a liberal democracy that holds a lot of the similar rights that Canada has. Why we're not working really hard to increase trade with them. Smaller countries like Australia, New Zealand, there's lots of other markets. Now, collectively, we'd have to be exporting to all of them to make up for the loss of the U.S. But I think it's possible and worth working towards.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing a reshifting, a readjustment of trading lanes. It's something that Canada's going to have to kind of try to figure out how to deal with. And I think we're kind of in that moment of it's uncomfortable. And it creates a lot of uncertainty, a lot of risk. Trying to attract, are you at all concerned about trying to attract capital investment into the country at moments like this?
I am, because, like I said, Canada, we're not in a great spot. We find ourselves far too dependent on trade with one single trading partner, which since the end of the Second World War, even long before that, has been a reliable trading partner. And now that has all shifted on us. So we're not in a good spot. And I do worry about, how does Canada continue to attract capital investment in an environment where there's a lot of uncertainty. But again, I think there's possible ways around it. We just have to show that we're serious about interprovincial trade, reducing those barriers, and also diversifying our trade.
I've read a lot of Scott Linscomb from the Pew Institute stuff, and one of the things that he has mentioned, who's very anti-tariff, like he hates tariffs, but one of the things that he has mentioned is that there's a significant difference between a 25% tariff and a 10% tariff. Yeah. A 10% tariff, that's like a currency fluctuation. That's, cost of goods went up. That is substantially different than a 25. Would you agree with that?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, it's 2.5 times worse than a 10% tariff, which, by the way, is what the president campaigned on. A universal 10% tariff. If that was what he imposed, you could at least give him credit for being consistent with what he campaigned on. But that is not what he campaigned on. He did not campaign on a 25% tariff on Canada and Mexico. So, yeah, absolutely, those tariffs far worse than a 10%. But in my mind, any tariff is too much.
You think the Bank of Canada's got some cutting to do this year?
I do, simply because I think they will be responding very quickly to a softening Canadian economy. Every day these tariffs stay in place, and we have no idea, is this going to be 4 days or 4 years? But every day these tariffs stay in place is weakening for the Canadian economy. So I do think the Bank of Canada will be prepared to offer more cuts in its coming meetings.
Well, Todd, really appreciate you joining us. Hopefully it doesn't take another 10 years for us to chat. So all the best to you. Enjoy the rest of the Crops Convention.
Thanks very much, Shaun. Thanks for having me.
That was my conversation with Todd Hirsch, Alberta-based economist. And one of the other things that I'm following here closely, as he talked about how, listen, economically, not smart. We're actually hurting ourselves economically by doing these retaliation tariffs. But the reality is that we kind of have to, because what are you going to do? Just look like you kind of rolled over and you did nothing? And there really isn't a lot of other ways based on, just the structure of Canada, and other countries may have other levers to pull. It's not really clear that we do besides this. We're an export-focused nation. And this idea, and this kind of goes back to my conversation earlier today with Neil Townsend from GrainFox. I'm getting a lot of you that are saying, you know what, we just need to forget about the U.S. We need to just find other markets. Sorry, not really possible. That sounds great. Sorry. It's just, you may not like what the U.S. is doing. You may not like how Canada is being treated. You may hate some of the comments that the president continues to make on this 51st state stuff. But we need to trade with the United States. If Canada does not have a trading relationship with the U.S., we are in for some real lifestyle changes around here. Kind of sound like my dad would, if this doesn't shape up, we're in for a real lifestyle change. And that probably there's a lot of you after looking at the commodity markets, what's happened as of late. You're saying that to your farm family, but it is very much the truth. We got to sort this out in some form or fashion. Now, the other thing that I've been kind of really watching here, and I'm interested in, is another variable being thrown into the mix, is that a lot of people put a lot of Canada's position in the world, a lot of that blame on Justin Trudeau. That, hey, the relationship with India, the relationship with China, the relationship with the U.S., Trump hates Trudeau, Trump hates Trudeau. I've heard all of this stuff from many of you. Well, now it's Mark Carney. And hey, that could be a really short stint, so maybe we shouldn't get used to that. But that's a different dynamic change. How do these countries respond to him? Is it the same old treatment of Canada kicking us around, kicking us down the hill and then dragging us back up to the top of the hill to kick us down again? Or was it really about Justin Trudeau? We'll see. Mark Carney's he's a different animal. And then there's the other part of it. What happens whenever we have this federal election? What does it look like if we have a conservative government or a Mark Carney-led government that's been voted in by the people of Canada? I think those are interesting dynamics because a lot of people have hung on to this Trudeau. And I'm not saying that he's excused from some of the blame. Absolutely. I hear you. I'm not displacing that whatsoever. But now that's done. We're past that. And don't give me the damage is set and we'll never be able to recover. Come on. That's not entirely true either, and I think many of you know this. This is an opportunity for Canada to really kind of reset and take a different look at some of these relationships and try to improve them if it's possible. And I can argue both sides of this. I feel a little bit conflicted in my thoughts in terms of what is going to happen. So if you have any thoughts on this, I'd love to hear them. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Does a Poilievre as Prime Minister or Mark Carney as Prime Minister, two different parties, does that change this dynamic of what is happening right now in the retaliation of China and the U.S. and Canada having a hard time finding friends and throwing India into that mix as well? Would love to hear from you indeed. Okay. Thanks so much, everybody, for listening to the RealAg Radio podcast. You get these kind of bonus segments because you download the podcast. You can listen on SiriusXM, but also download the podcast because you get extended interviews and bonus segments like you heard here today. And thanks so much for making us part of your day, getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. And we'll chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.